What if I told you we just got a new Jeskai Spellslinger commander that both creates tokens and buffs them at the same time? And you can build this entire deck for just €100. Sokka, Tenacious Tactician. Sokka is one of the most interesting commanders that came out in the newest avatar set. For 4 mana in Jeskai colors we get a 3/3 creature with both prowess and menace. But Sokka takes this even further by giving those keywords to all other ally creatures we control as well. So once we have a board filled with ally creatures, every cheap non-creature spell we cast turns into a board-wide buff, scaling even our smallest creatures into massive threats. And don't underestimate the impact of the menace mechanic either, because this will turn blocking into an absolute nightmare for your opponents. Now what makes Sokka really amazing and unique is his last ability. Whenever we cast any non-creature spell, we get to generate a 1/1 white ally token. And all tokens generated this way will obviously also get Menace and Prowess. So Sokka is both your token generator and your global pump engine. Any spell we cast, either be it a cantrip, a removal spell, a counter spell, a mana rock, or even an enchantment, will both increase the size of our army and buff it up at the same time. Which means we can go from an empty board to a lethal swing in just one single turn if we sequence it correctly. Now there are a few different ways you can actually build Sokka. You can go for a full ally tribal deck, or even a token generating spellslinging build with cards like Young Pyromancer or Impact Tremors. But we already have other commanders like General Tazgi or Narset who do both of those things better. So for this deck I decided to go with a build that uses Sokka's abilities to their fullest potential. Pure Jeskai Spellslinger. And the game plan of this deck is really simple. We want to resolve Sokka as early as possible, start chaining cheap efficient non-creature spells that will draw us cards and protect our board, generate a growing army of prowess menace ally tokens, and then turn them sideways for a huge swing to just close out the game. And the best part is you can build this entire deck for €100, not using any game changers, any tutors, or any fancy combo lines. So for the price of less than most mana bases, you're getting an explosive, interactive, and high tempo playstyle that feels like a deck that usually costs triple the price. Once you have Sokka and a few value pieces on the board, every turn will feel like a puzzle. Do we push for lethal on this turn? How many spells do we need to cast first? Or do we just hold on to our spells to set up an even more explosive next turn? As I do in all my videos, I will be going over every single card in the deck and explaining why I decided to include it. This video is divided up in 7 categories: the cantrips and card draw, the win conditions, the support cards, acceleration, protection and interaction, the lands, and in the end I also have an upgrade section where I will be going over the cards if you want to push this deck even further and you want to invest more than the €100 budget. And let's start this video off by talking about all the cheap spells and value pieces that actually make this deck function. The cantrips and the card draw. These are the cards that will allow us to chain our spells, generate us a ton of tokens, and buff up all of our tokens, all while keeping our hand full and ensuring we never run out of gas. Brainstorm, one of the most efficient card draw spells ever printed. For just 1 blue mana on instant speed you get to draw 3 cards. Then you have to put 2 cards from your hand back on top of your library. This effect will allow you to both dig really deep into your library and set up your future draws. And if you do decide to upgrade this deck by including some of the fetch lands, Brainstorm has a perfect synergy with those, since you can just draw 3 cards, put 2 cards you don't need at a given board state back on top of your library, crack your fetch land, you will get to search a land and reshuffle your library, which means those 2 useless cards will be reshuffled into your library and you actually set up for a chance to draw into something that's actually useful to you. Consider, whenever you cast this instant speed spell, you get to look at the top card of your library and you do get to decide if you want to either put it back on top or put it into your graveyard. And after you've done that, you get to draw a card. A classic cantrip spell that will allow us to filter the top card of our library, give us a Sokka trigger, and it will replace itself. As you will see later in this video, we do play a ton of cards we can actually cast from our graveyard. And sometimes just putting a card with either the flashback or the harmonize mechanic in your graveyard through this effect might actually change the outcome of the game. Crash Through, a really simple but really impactful 1 mana cantrip. Whenever you cast this, all creatures you control will gain trample until the end of turn. And this card is just perfect for Sokka, because once we are going for those explosive storm turns where we will be casting a ton of spells and turning our allies from 1/1s to 6/6 creatures by using the prowess mechanic, even though our tokens will already be hard to block due to the menace if you're playing against a token player who has a ton of 1/1 creatures to chum block with, a Crash Through is just the perfect solution to actually get combat damage through and take that player out of the game. Gitaxian Probe. This spell has a blue Phyrexian mana symbol in its cost, meaning you can either choose to pay 1 blue mana for it, or you can cast it by just paying the low cost of 2 life. It will allow you to look at target player's hand, which might actually give you some really relevant information, and the most important part, it will draw you a card. Due to the fact that you can pay life for this spell instead of paying mana, it is one of the only spells ever printed that will draw you a card for free. And this is obviously one of the best cards for any type of Storm or Spellslinger deck, because it will give you free prowess triggers, free ally tokens with Sokka, and free triggers on any other spellcast synergy we play in this deck, all while replacing itself and not losing you any amount of card advantage in the process. Opt. For 1 mana on instant speed, we get to scry 1 and then we get to draw a card, which will first allow us to manipulate the top card of our library. So for example, if you see there's a land card on top and you already have enough lands in your hand, you can just scry to the bottom, increasing the chances you might draw into an actually useful card. Preordain. This time you get to scry 2 and then draw a card, making the effect way better than the previous card, Opt, but it does have the downside that you can only cast it on sorcery speed, which as you will see later in this video is actually quite relevant. Serum Visions. Basically the reverse version of the previous card, meaning you will get to draw first and then you will get to manipulate the top cards of your library by scrying 2. Skull Clamp. A really simple artifact that every commander player knows. For 1 mana you get an equipment that will give the equipped creature +1 power and -1 toughness. And whenever the equipped creature would die, you get to draw 2 cards. Now I do understand that Skull Clamp might seem like a really controversial card in this deck, because we actually want to keep as many ally tokens as we can on the board. That being said, the amount of card advantage that a Skull Clamp will generate you is absolutely insane, and you just have to play this card in the deck. This card essentially reads: pay 1 generic mana, sacrifice 1 of your ally tokens, and you get to draw 2 cards. And even if you don't have any tokens on the battlefield, you can just equip this on Sokka or any other value creature, and if your opponents do manage to remove it, you will get to draw 2 cards in the process. And obviously, since this card is an artifact, it will trigger both Prowess and Sokka for just 1 generic mana when you cast it. A Little Chat. For 2 mana on instant speed, you get to look at the top 2 cards of your library. Then you get to put 1 of those cards in your hand and 1 goes to the bottom of your library. Already a pretty solid effect, allowing us to go 2 cards deep into our deck and actually drawing us a card. But the reason why this card is included in the deck is because it has the Casualty 1 mechanic, meaning whenever you cast a spell, you do get the option to sacrifice a creature with power 1 or greater. When you do, you get to copy this spell. And since we will be producing like 7 gazillion ally tokens every turn in this deck, we will always have a creature to sacrifice, giving us a 2 mana spell that will allow us to dig 4 cards deep into our deck and will actually draw us 2 of those cards. Expressive Iteration, one of my personal favorite EZ spells. For 2 mana, you get to look at the top 3 cards of your library. You get to put 1 of those cards into your hand, essentially drawing it. You get the option to exile 1 of those cards and you get to play it until the end of this turn. And 1 of those 3 cards will go to the bottom of your library. Essentially, this card will allow you to dig 3 cards deep and actually play 2 of those cards. And this is actually an excellent spell to start off your turn with before you even make your land drop. Because if you look at the top 3 cards and you do hit some lands, you can just exile 1 of those lands and you can make your land drop from exile, making sure you never lose value in the process. Psychotic Fury. For 2 mana on instant speed, target multicolor creature will gain double strike until the end of turn. And this card has won me more games than you could ever imagine. Because as you know, Sokka does have the prowess mechanic himself. Thanks to his menace, he becomes really hard to block, and whenever you did cast like 3 or 4 spells in a single turn, he will actually be at like 7 or 8 power. You can then just cast a Psychotic Fury on him, get another prowess trigger, and he will be hitting your opponents for like 16, 18 damage, and you will absolutely be able to take your opponents by surprise with this effect. Also a really good way to actually win on commander damage with Sokka. And as you will see later in this video, we do play a ton of other multicolor creatures that get a huge benefit from the double strike. And the best part is that this card will also replace itself by drawing us a card. South Pole Voyager, one of the few other ally creatures we play in this deck, meaning it will also get the Menace and Prowess from Sokka. And whenever this creature or another ally enters the battlefield under our control, we get to gain 1 life, which is a pretty neat little way to keep your life total topped up throughout the game. And whenever this ability resolves for the second time in any given turn, we also get to draw a card. This ability scales incredibly well with the ally tokens we will be generating, because getting 2 Sokka triggers in any given turn will draw you a card. And like I already mentioned, instant speed spells are just fantastic in this deck, because they sort of allow you to bypass the once per turn mechanic. During your turn, you can just cast this creature, follow up with like a mana rock, you will have 2 allies entering the battlefield and you will get to draw a card. Then during an opponent's turn, you can for example cast a counter spell and a random cantrip like a brainstorm. You will have 2 allies entering whenever you have Sokka on the field, and this card will draw you another card, really making this into one of the most cost-efficient draw engines in the entire deck. Waterbender Ascension. For 2 mana, you get an enchantment that whenever any creature deals combat damage to an opponent will get a quest counter. And then whenever this card has 4 or more quest counters, you will get to draw a card. And due to the way of how this card is worded, you will actually get 1 trigger per creature that connects. So let's say for example you swing with 6 of your ally tokens and all 6 of those creatures do connect. You will then get a total of 6 triggers of this card. The first 4 triggers will put a quest counter on it, and the last 2 triggers will also draw you a card. And it's not just a one-time effect, you will get to keep drawing cards for as long as this enchantment is on the battlefield, which is just absolutely insane because all of your creature tokens will have the Menace keyword and they will be really hard to block. Now obviously there are other cards with a really similar effect, like a Bident of Tassa, a Coastal Piracy, or an Enduring Curiosity, but I really think this is the best option out of those cards for this type of deck, because it will only cost you 2 mana, it's really easy to get it online and get to those 4 quest counters, and since this card is an enchantment, it will give you Sokka triggers whenever you play it. And on top of that, it also has the Waterband 4 mechanic, meaning for the cost of 4 generic mana, which is reduced by 1 for every creature or artifact you tap for it, you can make one of your creatures unblockable until the end of turn. Now honestly, you won't be using this ability very often, but it is a really nice way to actually get commander damage through with Sokka and take opponents out of the game that way. Zenith Festival. For 2 red mana plus X, you get to exile the top X cards of your library, and then you are allowed to play them until the end of the next turn. And the last little part of that ability is actually quite relevant, because you can just cast this early in the game. Let's say for 4 mana, you will get to exile the top 2 cards of your library. You can just pass the turn, and by the time it's your turn again, those 2 cards will still be available to you. Some sort of a card advantage investment you can use on a later turn. Now honestly, that kind of effect is already really solid in this type of deck, but on top of that, it also has the Harmonize mechanic, which is by far my favorite mechanic from 2025. We are allowed to cast this card from our graveyard by paying the Harmonize cost, which is also 2 red mana plus X, but in addition, whenever we cast this spell, we are also allowed to tap any creature we control, and the cost of the spell will be reduced by its power. And this can get absolutely crazy with the Prowess mechanic, because if you are setting up for a storm turn and you did cast like 3, 4, 5 cantrips in a turn, your Sokka will usually be at like 8 power. You can then just cast a spell for 2 red mana, tap your Sokka, and you will be able to dig 8 cards deep into your deck. And on your next turn, you will just have a huge amount of cards available to you, and you will be able to storm off and just instantly win the game. And now that we're talking about the Harmonize mechanic, Winter Night Stories. For 3 mana, you get to draw 3 cards, and you have to discard 2 cards, unless you discard a creature card. Now in itself, this is already a fantastic card, even if you don't have a creature to discard. And thanks to the Harmonize mechanic, you can just cast this card once again from your graveyard. And I can guarantee you, at all times, you will have a 4 power Sokka you can tap to pay for this Harmonize cost, and you will be able to cast this really impactful spell for just 1 blue mana. Brain Surge. Brainstorm's 3 mana big brother. You get to draw 4 cards and then you have to put 2 cards from your hand back on top of your library, giving you access to 4 new cards and allowing you to set up your draws on your next turns. And just like I talked about with Brainstorm, if you do decide to include some of the fetch lands in this deck, this card has an insane synergy with them, allowing you to just shuffle away the cards that you did decide to put back. Frantic Search. For 3 mana on instant speed, you get to draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, and then you get to untap 3 of your lands, essentially making this into a free spell to get some free Sokka triggers with and get a free loot effect. Because you can just tap 3 of your lands, cast a spell, untap those 3 lands, you will then have generated an ally token, you will have gotten your prowess trigger, and you will get to dig 2 cards deeper into your deck. And the fact that you can cast this card on instant speed makes it the perfect card to cast during your opponent's turns, making it really easy to trigger cards like South Pole Voyager and draw even more cards. Tokasia's Welcome. This 3 mana enchantment will draw you a card whenever a creature with mana value 3 or less enters the battlefield under our control. So whenever we cast any non-creature spell with Sokka on the battlefield and we do get to generate an ally token, this will draw us an additional card. And like I talked about with South Pole Voyager, you can easily cast any instant speed spell during an opponent's turn to essentially bypass the once per turn mechanic. Just create an ally token during each of your opponent's turns and this card will potentially draw you 4 cards per turn cycle. And a pretty similar card is Enduring Innocence. Whenever any creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield, we get to draw a card. And this card has exactly the same purpose in the deck as the previous card. Now when you do compare this card to Tokasia's Welcome, it is actually slightly worse, because Enduring Innocence is an enchantment creature, meaning whenever you cast a spell you won't get any Sokka triggers because it doesn't count as a non-creature spell. It does have the benefit whenever this creature would die, it just returns to the battlefield as an enchantment, essentially forcing your opponents to deal twice with this card. Big score and unexpected windfall. While both cards have different names and a different mana cost, they do have exactly the same effect. Whenever you cast any of these 4 mana instant speed spells, you have to discard a card. When you do, you get to draw 2 new cards and you get to generate 2 treasure tokens. A really solid way to ditch any cards you don't need and just dig a little deeper into your library. And the treasure tokens that these cards will generate you are really relevant if you are setting up for a storm turn, because you can just keep them on the battlefield and on your next turn you will have 2 more mana available to you, allowing you to cast more cantrips, more spells, get more tokens and get more prowess triggers. Distant Melody. For 4 mana we get to choose a creature type, and obviously we will be choosing ally. Then whenever this spell resolves, we get to draw 1 card for each creature of the chosen type we control. Now whenever you do have Sokka on the battlefield, this card will always draw you at least 2 cards. Because you cast a spell, Sokka will generate you an ally token and then the spell will check how many allies you control. And that's just the bottom line. Because let's say you have Sokka and 4 other ally tokens on the battlefield, this card will draw you a total of 6 cards for 4 mana, instantly refilling your hand and allowing you to just win the game on the next turn. Meeting of Minds. For 4 mana on instant speed, you get to draw 2 cards. But this card has the Convoke mechanic, meaning you can tap any creature you control to help pay for its mana cost. Now in some turns you will just be casting non-creature spells, generating new tokens, and you won't be able to swing with them because you don't have a way to give them haste. Meeting of Minds is an excellent way to turn any untapped creature token you're not using into some excellent value. Just tap your Sokka, 3 of your ally tokens, and you will be able to draw 2 cards for absolutely free. Whirlwind of Thought. This 4 mana enchantment will draw you a card whenever you cast a non-creature spell. If you do manage to get this card out on the battlefield really early, I can promise you, you will win the game. Cast a counter spell, removal spell, protection spell, a mana rock, an enchantment, and you will be drawing a huge amount of cards in the process. This is by far the card draw engine in the deck with the biggest potential. It is just impossible to run out of cards whenever you have this on the battlefield. And the last card in this section is Treasure Cruise, a simple sorcery speed spell that will draw you 3 cards for the cost of 8 mana, which obviously is some horrible value. But to make up for that, this card has the Delve mechanic, meaning whenever we cast this card, we get to exile cards from our graveyard, and for each card we exile, the cost of this spell is reduced by 1 generic mana. Now, as you can imagine, in this type of deck where we do play a ton of really cheap cantrips, our graveyard will always be filled with spells. In every single game I played with this deck, I was always able to cast Treasure Cruise for just 1 mana. Drawing 3 cards for just 1 mana is Ancestral Recall levels of good. Next up we have the win conditions. Now with the board filled with a huge amount of Prowess and Menace creature tokens, we don't need any fancy combos to actually win the game. Some of these cards allow us to give our tokens an even bigger stat boost, some will help us produce even more Prowess tokens, and other cards simply push damage through in ways that are almost impossible to stop. Balmor, Battle Mage Captain, a classic EZ Spellslinger commander that is an auto-inclusion in any token-based storm deck. For 2 mana you get a 1/3 flying burp that will give all your creatures +1 power and trample whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, essentially doubling up on the damage you will be dealing during the turn you do decide to storm off and go for the lethal swing. And just like I talked about with Crash Through, the trample is actually really relevant, because you can't win the game if your opponents do control a ton of 1/1 creature tokens. The trample keyword really solves that problem. Haze of Rage. For 2 mana, all creatures you control will get +1 power until the end of turn. And this card also has the Storm mechanic, meaning whenever we cast it, we get to copy it for each other spell we cast this turn. And this effect goes absolutely nuts in this type of Spellslinger deck. Just cast a couple of mana rocks, a couple of cantrips, and this 2 mana spell will give all your creatures +5 power, which is some absolutely ridiculous value. Now that in itself would already be enough to include this card in the deck, but on top of that it also has the buyback mechanic, meaning whenever you cast a spell you get the option to pay an additional 2 generic mana. If you did, whenever this spell resolves, instead of going to your graveyard you actually get to return it to your hand, which is perfect to just set up a lethal swing on one of your opponents, return this to your hand, and on the next turn you will just be able to use this again and take your other opponents out of the game. A win condition card that just keeps coming back. Monastery Mentor, a 3 mana creature with the Prowess mechanic. And really similar to Sokka's ability, whenever you cast a non-creature spell you get to generate a 1/1 monk token with the Prowess mechanic. And this card does have a couple of functions in the deck. You can just use this card as an alternative win con for whenever you don't have Sokka available to you, or whenever you do have Sokka you will just be able to generate double the amount of Prowess tokens, which will result in a crazy big board state. Just keep in mind the tokens that this card will generate you aren't actually allies, so they won't get Menace and they won't get a second instance of the Prowess mechanic. Monastery Mentor is just one of those creatures that if your opponents don't have removal for it will take over the game all by itself. Aligned Heart, a 3 mana enchantment with the Flurry mechanic, meaning it will trigger whenever you cast your second spell in any given turn. And whenever this triggers, you get to put a rally counter on this enchantment, and then you get to generate a 1/1 monk token with Prowess for each rally counter this enchantment has on itself, acting in a really similar way as a Monastery Mentor. And this little enchantment can get out of control really fast. Just play this on your own turn, follow up with a cantrip, you'll already get 1 counter on it. During an opponent's turn you can also cast 2 instant speed spells, get another counter, get 2 monk tokens, and if this enchantment is left unanswered and you get to like 5, 6, 7 counters, you will just be spawning this many Prowess tokens that you will just win the game. Not too shabby for just a 3 mana enchantment. Longshot, Rebel Bowman, a 4 mana ally card, meaning it will also get Menace and Prowess thanks to Sokka. And passively, for as long as this creature is on the battlefield, every non-creature spell we cast will cost 1 generic mana less. An excellent cost reduction effect that will easily enable us to cast even more spells during any given turn and get even more value. And since it does state non-creature spells, it even works on enchantments and artifacts. Its second passive effect will deal 2 damage to each opponent whenever we cast a non-creature spell. And this effect is actually way more impactful than it sounds, because in most turns we will be playing like 3 to 5 non-creature spells, which Longshot will then translate into a huge chunk of damage to each opponent, and the lower the life total of our opponents, the easier we can set up for a lethal turn and just win the game. Narset, Enlightened Exile, another really cool Jeskai Spellslinger commander that has a pretty similar playstyle as Sokka. Passively, all creatures you control will get Prowess, including Narset herself and all of the creature tokens we control. And yeah, yes, before you ask, Prowess does stack. If you have both Sokka and Narset on the battlefield, all your allied tokens will actually have 2 instances of Prowess. So every non-creature spell you cast will now give +2 power and +2 toughness, which just like Balmog will essentially double the amount of power you get on your turns you are going for the lethal swing. And whenever Narset attacks, we get to exile target non-creature card with mana value less than Narset's power from our graveyard. When we do, we get to cast that spell for free. Now since Narset already has 3 power herself and we play some really cheap spells in this deck, we will essentially be able to just recast any spell we might have in our graveyard, giving us the effect of the exile spell for free and giving us even more prowess triggers. And the spell actually gets cast before the damage step. So whenever you swing, you get to cast the exile spell first, your creatures will then get the prowess trigger, and then you will go to the damage step, instantly giving you the benefit. And the last card in this section is Sokka's Charge. For 4 mana, you get an enchantment that will give all allies you control double strike and lifelink during your turn. Now while this card might seem like some sort of a win more card, trust me, it really isn't. Because now your tokens and Sokka will turn in something truly scary. Because they will have Menace, Prowess, Double Strike, Lifelink. Let's just say you have Sokka and 3 other ally tokens on the battlefield. You cast this enchantment, everything will get a Prowess trigger, you play another Cantrip, another Prowess trigger, and you will now have a buffed up Sokka and 3/3/3 Double Strike, Menace, Lifelink tokens swinging at your opponents, which is just absolutely ridiculous. Just imagine you casting this card and actually having like 5, 6, 7 ally tokens on the battlefield, just doubling all damage you deal thanks to the Double Strike and gaining you an insane amount of life thanks to the lifelink. If you're enjoying this video and you want to support me and the channel, check out the YouTube membership program. All members will get access to all of my deck lists before the videos even go live. You will get some awesome Panzer emojis you can use anywhere on Discord and YouTube, and you will get access to the member exclusive chat rooms in the Discord server, where I do share what projects I'm currently working on and some fun behind the scenes updates. And speaking of the Discord, if you're not in there yet, come and join us. It's honestly one of the fastest growing Magic communities out there right now. People are brewing decks together, theory crafting some of the new commanders from the Avatar set, and helping each other tune their decks. And a huge thanks to everyone who's already a YouTube member. Thanks to you, I can keep doing what I love doing most. Build some really strong and unique commander decks. The links to both the Discord and the membership program are in the description below. Next up, we have the support cards. These are the cards that make the deck run really smooth. Synergy pieces, utility creatures, and effects that multiply the value of each spell we cast. These cards won't win the game on their own, but they make the deck way more explosive. Lava Dart. For 1 mana, you get an instant speed spell that will deal 1 damage to any target. And you can also flashback this spell by sacrificing a mountain. Now this card might seem really underwhelming, but just hear me out. The reason it is included in the deck isn't because of the 1 damage it pings, but it is included because it does allow us to play 2 spells for just 1 mana, which will buff our board thanks to the prowess triggers and generate us allied tokens thanks to Sokka. And later in the game, if you are going for that lethal swing, sacrificing a mountain really isn't that big of a deal. Just step the mountain, cast a lava dart, get a trigger on everything, recast it again from your graveyard by sacrificing that tapped mountain, get another trigger, and get even more power and allies on the board. Excellent value for just a simple 1 mana spell. And it's also a really good way to get 2 triggers out of any of the other value cards we play in this deck, like drawing 3 cards of a Whirlwind of Thought, drawing additional cards by generating additional ally tokens with an Enduring Innocence on the field, or getting even more tokens of a Monastery Mentor. Bitter Reunion. Whenever this 2 mana enchantment enters the battlefield, we get the option to discard a card. When we do, we get to draw 2 new cards. A really simple loot effect that will give us Sokka triggers because it is an enchantment. But what makes this enchantment better than a generic instant speed loot spell is its activated ability. For 1 generic mana and sacrificing this card, all creatures we control will gain haste until the end of turn. And as you will see later in this section, we do play a ton of cards that will give our creatures haste. Because once you are able to give haste to the tokens that Sokka will generate you, you will be able to surprise your opponents out of nowhere. You can go from an empty board, just cast some spells, get a ton of ally tokens and prowess triggers, and normally you wouldn't be able to swing with them. But now you can just sacrifice this enchantment, everything will get haste, you can swing with them instantly, and take an opponent opponent out of the game with it. And trust me, this deck goes from 0 to 100 so fast that your opponents will never see it coming. Lightning Greaves. For 2 mana, you get an equipment that will give the equipped creature Shroud and Haste. A really solid way to give either Sokka or any of your other value creatures protection from spot removal. And due to the fact that you can equip this artifact for 0 mana, you can essentially give your entire board haste with this equipment. You can just be playing a ton of cantrips, generate a ton of ally tokens, equip the boots to each single one of them, and you will be able to instantly swing with it. Both a great protection piece and a great haste enabler. Sorcerer class. Whenever this 2 mana class card enters the battlefield, we get to draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. Pretty solid way to discard whatever we don't need and dig a little deeper. Then for a blue and a red mana, you can make this class go to level 2, which will give all creatures you control an additional ability. And that is that you can tap them to add either a blue or a red mana to your mana pool, but you can only spend that mana to cast any instant or sorcery spells or to level up this clause. Now in this deck, you will have some turns where you are still setting up the board, creating some ally tokens, and you won't actually be swinging with them. This clause will then enable you to tap those tokens for mana, play some additional cantrips, additional card draw spells, or whenever you don't have any other play, you can even use it to pay for the 5 mana cost to make this clause go to its last level, which in this deck can function as some sort of an alternate win con. Whenever you cast any instant or sorcery spell, that spell will deal damage to each opponent for each instant and sorcery that you already cast this turn. And you don't have to play around this card, you just have to be doing what you would be doing anyways. Play a Brainstorm, deal 1 damage, a Get Action Probe, deal 2 damage, play a Crash Through, deal 3 damage. All your creatures will be buffed, you will be able to swing for a huge amount of damage, and thanks to this enchantment you will have dealt an additional 6 damage to each opponent. If you do have this card at its max level and your opponents have no way to deal with it, it will win you the game eventually. Frostcliff Siege, a 3 mana enchantment that allows us to choose one of 2 options whenever it enters the battlefield. If we choose the first option, whenever one or more creatures we control deal combat damage to a player, we get to draw a card. Now honestly, you will never ever choose this option because it isn't worded in the same way as a Waterbender's Ascension, for example. Since it says 1 or more creatures, even if you connect with 10 creatures to an opponent, you will only get to draw 1 card. We will always be choosing the second option, which will passively give all creatures we control haste, trample, and a +1 power boost. Another fantastic haste enabler that will allow us to instantly swing with our ally tokens the turn they come down, make sure we can get damage through thanks to the trample, and will give a nice little power boost in addition to that. Kabira Evangel, an ally creature, so it will get prowess and menace thanks to Sokka. And whenever this creature or any other ally creature enters the battlefield under our control, we get to choose a color, and all ally creatures we control will get protection from that color until the end of turn. And this effect does have some insane potential in this deck, because it will trigger every time you cast a non-creature spell with Sokka on the battlefield. You can just cast a couple of non-creature spells, give all of your allies protection from some specific colors, and your board will essentially become unblockable. If someone is trying to remove Sokka by using a Path to Exile, just keep 1 mana open, cast a cantrip like a Brainstorm for example, an ally will enter, you will be able to give Sokka protection from that spell, and he will survive the removal. If someone is playing a damage-based board wipe like a Blasphemous Act, once again just cast any of your cantrips, give everything protection from red, and all your creatures will be fine. A really potent little ally, this one. Veiran, Voice of Duality. For 3 mana you get a creature with the Magecraft ability, meaning it will trigger from either casting any instant or sorcery or copying one. And whenever you do, Veiran will get +1 power and +1 toughness until the end of turn, functioning somewhat in the same way as Prowess. And passively, whenever any permanent you control would trigger from you casting an instant or sorcery spell, it will trigger an additional time. And the amount of value doubling implications Veiran has in this deck is just beyond crazy. Sokka will now generate you 2 ally tokens whenever you cast an instant or sorcery. All creatures you control with Prowess will now get 2 triggers whenever you cast an instant or sorcery. A card like Whirlwind of Thought will draw you even more cards. Longshot will now be dealing dealing 4 damage to everyone whenever you cast a spell. And Veyran even doubles her own semi-prowess ability, an auto-inclusion in any sort of Spellslinger deck. Enduring Courage. For 4 mana you get an enchantment creature that whenever another creature enters a battlefield will give it +2 power and haste until the end of turn. And this card is basically the power-crept version of an Ogre Battle Driver. A fantastic haste enabler that will allow you to instantly swing with all the ally tokens you create, and it will give them a huge power boost in the process. And just like with Enduring Innocence, if your opponents are able to remove this creature, it will just return to the battlefield as an enchantment, forcing them to use 2 removal spells to permanently get rid of this card. Tuk Tuk Scrapper. Whenever this ally or any other ally enters the battlefield, we get to destroy target artifact. Then this card will deal damage to that artifact's controller equal to the amount of allies we control. Now first up, whenever you have this creature on the battlefield, you can just wipe the board of any artifacts. Since you will be generating this many ally tokens thanks to Sokka, whenever your opponents do decide to play an artifact spell, just play a non-creature spell, trigger Sokka, destroy that artifact. Now that in itself already makes this into a really strong card, but the fact that he will also ping damage equal to the amount of allies you control every time you do so is absolutely crazy. Because in this deck you will be controlling like 5 to 10 allies at any given time, and you can easily keep making more thanks to Sokka. This creature will really deal chunks of like 5, 6, 7, 8 damage to your opponent's life total, spitting them onto a really low life total, enabling you to easily take them out of the game. And this card will grant you immediate value whenever you play it, because it does trigger its own ability whenever it enters. Pinnacle Monk, a 5 mana 2/2 creature with the prowess mechanic. And whenever this card enters a battlefield, we get to pick any instant or sorcery spell in our graveyard and return it to our hand. A really solid recursion piece to just get more uses out of any spell we already cast this game. Now honestly, paying 5 mana for this creature body and this type of effect is a horrible deal. But if you don't need the effect, you can just play the backside of this card, which is a land that taps for 1 red mana, and you can even make it enter untapped for the low cost of 3 life. Like I mentioned in all my videos, there really isn't any reason to not be playing any of the MDFC land cards in your decks. Next up, we have the acceleration section. These are the cards that will ensure that we actually do have enough mana to keep the spell chain going. Sokka really wants to be on the battlefield as early as possible, because the sooner he is online, the sooner we can start generating creatures and growing our board. Even though these cards might seem really simple, they really are the backbone of what makes this deck work. Sol Ring, the most efficient mana rock ever printed. A 1 mana artifact that will generate you 2 colorless mana. And Sol Ring can enable some really insane early starts, because as you will see later, we are playing a ton of 2 mana rocks. Just playing a Sol Ring on turn 1, tap it to cast another 2 mana rock will enable you to cast Sokka on turn 2. And trust me, whenever this happens, the game is basically over. Strike It Rich, a simple 1 mana spell that will just generate us a treasure token. And we can also flashback it for 3 mana. And while this spell is absolutely horrible in most decks, it is just fantastic for any sort of Spellslinger deck. You can cast this early in the game to just get Sokka out 1 turn earlier. Whenever you cast it, it will trigger any sort of spellcast synergy in the deck, either be it Sokka or a Whirlwind of Thought, for example. And due to the fact that it has the flashback mechanic, it's actually 1 singular card that you will be able to cast 2 times to get double the triggers. We also play 5 2 mana rocks in this deck, an Arcane Signet, an Izet Signet, and 3 of the Talismans. And all these cards have exactly the same function. They help us fix our colors, enable us to play Sokka on turn 3, they will ensure that we do have extra mana to cast additional spells and get additional triggers, and because all of these cards are artifacts, we will actually get Sokka triggers whenever we cast them. So it's actually not all that bad to draw into these mana rocks even later in the game. Whenever you are playing this deck, you really want to take some aggressive mulligans to ensure that you at least have 1 acceleration piece in your opening hand. The deck really feels a whole lot different if you are able to get Sokka out on turn 3 instead of turn 4. Thunderclap Drake, a 2 mana flying creature that will reduce the cost of any instant or sorcery spell you play by 1 generic mana. Now there are a couple of creatures that you can play in this slot. You can play a classic Goblin Electromancer, a Ral Monsoon Mage, or even that cute little otter from the Bloomburrow set. All of these 2-drops will give you the same cost reduction, making it way easier to set up some insane storm turns and just chain your spells. The reason why I did decide to include Thunderclap Drake over any of those other cards is its activated ability. For 2 mana and sacrificing this creature, we get to copy target instant or sorcery spell for each time we cast our commander from the command zone. Now I'm gonna be honest, I have never ever even used this ability. That being said, the other cost reducers that I mentioned don't even have this ability. And I suppose in some games this little activated ability might actually change the outcome of the game. Stormkiln Artist, a 4 mana creature with the Magecraft ability, meaning whenever you cast an instant or sorcery or you copy one, you do get to create a treasure token. And this creature really is the perfect storm enabler. You can just cast one of your cantrips, get a treasure token, use that treasure to cast another cantrip, get another treasure token, and he will just keep reducing you mana for as long as you can keep chaining spells. Whenever you have this on the battlefield, mana will honestly never ever be a problem for you anymore. And since he even triggers whenever you copy spells, he does have some insane synergies with some of the storm spells we play in this deck. They will generate you 1 treasure token for each time you copy them. Next up, we have the protection and interaction section. Once Sokka hits the field, we will become the problem at the table. The cards in this section make sure that we stay the problem, protecting Sokka and our tokens and giving us ways to disrupt our opponent's game plans. And remember, most of these spells will actually give us Sokka trigger, so we will be generating tokens while we are protecting him. An offer you can't refuse. A 1 mana spell that will counter target non-creature spell. In return, the controller of that spell will get to generate 2 treasure tokens. In my opinion, one of the best counter spells ever printed. Just giving an opponent 2 little treasure tokens in return for countering their board wipe, their removal spell, their game-winning combo piece will always be a really good deal. Just leave 1 mana open for the spell and you will always be able to protect Sokka. Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshares, and Pongify. Yeah, what can I say? These are some of the most efficient removal spells ever printed. Swords and Path will both exile any creature on the board, which is just excellent to remove someone's commander or is even really great to deal with some reanimation players. And a Pongify will just destroy any creature on the battlefield and give them a little 3/3 creature token in return. And remember, all of these 1 mana removal spells will generate you ally tokens whenever you have Sokka on the field, actually giving you an additional reward for when you are dealing with some of your opponent's most problematic creatures. Slip out the back. For 1 mana on instant speed, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and then it phases out. Phasing out basically means that creature won't exist until its controller's next upkeep. And you can use this spell both offensively and defensively. If someone is casting a board wipe or removal spell, you can just use this on Sokka. He will phase out, he will survive the removal or board wipe spell. On your next turn, he just phases back in. Or you can even use this spell on your opponent's creatures. If you're playing against a Krenko player, for example, and they're about to make a gazillion goblins, just phase out their Krenko, he won't exist until their next turn, and you will have bought another turn to deal with the problem. Stubborn Denial. For 1 mana, you get to counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1 generic mana. Obviously, this is horrible value, but this card also has the Ferocious mechanic, meaning if you do control a creature with power 4 or greater whenever you cast this, it's just a 1 mana spell that will counter anything. Now, while Sokka is a 3 power creature, thanks to his prowess mechanic, he will always ensure that the Ferocious mechanic is active. Because let's say you have Sokka on the battlefield and someone is trying to cast an Omniscience, you can just step an island, play your Stubborn Denial, Sokka will get a prowess trigger going to 4 power, and then Stubborn Denial will check the power. Sokka is now at 4 power and you do get to counter the Omniscience. Pretty cool and really efficient synergy. Boros Charm. For 2 mana, you get an instant speed spell that allows you to pick 1 out of 3 options. You can use it to deal 4 damage to target player, which might come in handy in some games if you really need to ping damage to someone's face. You can give all permanents you control indestructible until the end of turn, a perfect way to protect your board from any sort of board wipe, or you can use it to give target creature double strike until the end of turn, which you can use to double up Sokka's power and take an opponent by surprise by commander damage. Honestly, all the options on Boros Charm are just fantastic and you will always find a use for it. Down's Truce, a 2 mana instant speed spell that will give you and all permanents you control hexproof until the end of turn. A really good 2 mana protection spell, and it also has the gift mechanic, meaning whenever you cast a spell you do get the option to make an opponent draw a card. When you do, it will also give all permanents you control indestructible until the end of turn. Now, as you can imagine, in this creature token heavy list, board wipes are our absolute worst enemy, and this is just an additional way to prevent our board from being wiped. And the fact that it also gives you as a casted player hexproof can actually be quite relevant. If an opponent, for example, is using a Bresh Taunter as a combo piece and they want to ping 1 million damage to your face, you can just make yourself hexproof and that opponent won't be able to target you. You'd actually be surprised how many cards actually target players in Magic. Grand Crescendo. For 2 white mana plus X, you get to create X 1/1 creature tokens. Then all creatures you control will gain indestructible until the end of turn. Another really solid protection spell you can cast for just 2 mana to prevent your board from being wiped. I suppose you can also invest some mana into the X to generate some cute little additional extra creature tokens, but that's not the reason why it's included. It's just all about the indestructibility effect. Negate. For 2 mana, you get to counter any non-creature spell. You can use this to counter your opponent's removal pieces or any of their combo pieces. Negate might seem like a really simple budget counter spell, but it is actually still a really good card to include in any of your decks. Snap. For 2 mana on instant speed, you get to bounce target creature, and then you get to untap 2 lands, essentially making this into some sort of a free interaction spell, because it will untap the lands you use to cast this. And this also translates really well into our spell slinging playstyle. You can just cast this, get a Sokka trigger, untap those lands, and you will have more mana available to follow up with even more spells and get even more Sokka and Prowess triggers. Amphibian Downpour. This is one of the most criminally underrated cards in the format. For 3 mana, you get an enchant creature spell with flash, meaning you can cast it on instant speed. And the enchanted creature will be turned into a 1/1 frog that loses all other abilities. Now, this type of effect is actually a really solid way to deal with someone's commander. Let's say you're playing against a Karlov player, you can just Amphibian Downpour their commander, and if they don't have any way to sacrifice or destroy their own Karlov, they won't have any way to make it go to the command zone and recast it, and they will be stuck with a 1/1 useless frog. And the best part is that this enchantment also has the storm mechanic, meaning you get to copy this enchantment for every spell cast before it this turn. Now obviously you can just cast 2 spells, follow up with this card, and you will get to turn all 3 opposing commanders into frogs. Pretty solid, but where this thing gets absolutely crazy is the fact that the storm mechanic counts every spell cast this turn, even spells your opponents cast. So you can just leave 3 mana open, and whenever an opponent casts like 2 spells in their own turn, flash this enchantment in, and you will actually get 2 copies out of it. If you take one thing home from this video, please let it be how good of a card that Amphibian Downpour is. Wear and Tear. The left part of this card allows you to deal with any sort of artifact on instant speed, a perfect way to deal with a Crucible of Worlds, a Phyrexian Altar, a Thornbite Staff, and the right part of this card allows you to destroy any enchantment. An Aura Shards, an Insidious Roots, a Waterbender's Ascension, whatever. And the best part about this card is that it has the fuse mechanic, meaning that you can actually pay 3 mana to cast both sides of the spell at once. Fun little fact, if you do decide to fuse this card, it will only count as 1 spell cast. It will combine both halves into 1 spell, so it will only give you 1 Sokka trigger. And the last card in this section is a board wipe of our own, Blasphemous Act. For 9 mana, you get a spell that will deal 13 damage to every creature on the board. But the cost of this spell is reduced by 1 generic mana for each creature on the battlefield. And since you'll only need a board wipe whenever the board is filled with creatures, this is just a 1 mana board wipe. Now, we are a creature-based list ourselves, so it might seem pretty weird to include a board wipe. That being said, in some games you will just fall behind on the board and you do need to reset everything. And a Blasphemous Act is just one of the most efficient options to do so. And you can also pull off some really neat tricks with this card. If you have a board filled with allies, you can just cast one of the protection spells I mentioned earlier in this section, give everything you control indestructible, and then cast a Blasphemous Act, making it act as a one-sided board wipe. And this card also scales really well with Kabira Evangel, because whenever you have it on the battlefield, you can just cast a Blasphemous Act, Sokka will trigger and generate you an ally token, you can give all your allies protection from red, the Blasphemous Act will resolve, and everyone's board will be wiped and all your allies will survive. Your opponents won't have any blockers left, just swing with all of your allies and instantly win the game. Next up we have the lands. Since this is a budget list, the mana base isn't anything fancy. We just play some really consistent lands that will ensure that we do have all our colors available to us to cast Sokka and start chaining our spells. If you do want to invest more mana into the deck, the mana base is a really good place to start. Like I mentioned before, the fetch lands are really good. You can include a Triome, some of the Shock lands, some of the Verge lands, some of the bond lands. You won't need any of these expensive lands to make the deck work, but they will make it a ton more consistent. We're not really running any utility lands, so I will be going over this section rather quickly. We're playing 3 Pain lands, 3 Scry lands, 3 Filter lands, 3 Check lands, 2 of the Horizon lands, a Command Tower, an Exotic Orchard, a Mistrized Village, 1 of the Cycle lands, 1 Fast land, a Perilous Landscape, and for basics we're playing 6 islands, 5 mountains, and 3 planes. And last up we have the upgrade section. If you do love this type of spellslinging playstyle and you want to invest more money into the deck, these are in my opinion the most impactful options. You don't need any of these cards by any means, but they will make the deck way more explosive and way more consistent. At the end of this section I will also be flashing into the screen what cards you should actually take out to include any of these upgrades. Galadriel's Dismissal. For 1 mana on instant speed you get to phase out target creature, which like I talked about with Slip Out the Back is an excellent way to both protect Sokka or disrupt your opponents. And this card also has the kicker mechanic, meaning whenever you cast it you can pay an additional 3 mana and it will actually phase out each creature target player controls. So instead of just protecting Sokka, this can also be used to protect any other value creatures and all of the tokens you control. Or you can even use it to just phase out all creatures that target player controls and they won't be able to block your damage. Kori Steelcutter. For 2 mana you get an equipment with the Flurry mechanic, meaning whenever you cast your second spell in any given turn you will get to generate a 1/1 monk token with prowess. Pretty similar to Aligned Heart, this card will generate you additional 1/1 prowess tokens. And whenever you create one of those tokens you get to equip this equipment to it for free, giving it +1/1, trample and haste. Now while it won't generate you more and more monk tokens over time like Aligned Heart, this card is just way more efficient in my opinion. It has a lower mana cost and you can use it to give some of your creatures a slight stat boost, haste and trample. Caretaker's Talent. A 3 mana class card that has exactly the same effect as a Tokazia's Welcome. Whenever a token enters the battlefield under your control you get to draw a card, and this effect only triggers once per turn. I already talked about how easy it is to trigger this effect during an opponent's turn thanks to Sokka's ability, and on top of that it is a class card, meaning that it even has 2 additional stages that will give you an extra benefit. For just 1 white mana you can make it go to level 2 and you get to create a copy of any token you control. A good way to double up on your ally tokens or even double up on your treasure tokens. And by paying an additional 4 mana you can make it go to its final stage, which will give all creatures you control +2/+2, which is a really huge stat boost, especially if you control like 10 creatures on the board. Fierce Guardianship. A 3 mana game changer card that allows you to counter any non-creature spell. But whenever you do control your commander, you actually get to cast this spell for free. Like I mentioned in all my videos, all the spells that cost 0 mana whenever you control your commander are absolutely broken and should be banned in the format in my opinion. That being said, this card is just way too good not to include in the deck. You can just tap all your mana, play your Sokka, generate a huge amount of ally tokens, and even though you don't have any untapped lands left, this spell will allow you to still protect your entire board. Flawless Maneuver. Yeah, it's included for exactly the same reasons as the previous card. For as long as you control Sokka, you get a 0 mana spell that will give all creatures you control indestructible. Now obviously the value on this card is insane, but these free spells also actually generate you a free ally token with Sokka on the field, making them even better. Akroma's Will. Whenever you cast this 4 mana instant speed spell, you get to pick 1 out of 2 options. The first option will give all your creatures flying, vigilance and double strike until the end of turn. A really huge effect that will make your creatures more evasive and will make them deal double damage. The second effect will give all your creatures lifelink, indestructible and protection from all colors, acting as a really good protection spell and a way to gain a huge amount of life. And the best part about this card is that whenever you do have your commander on the battlefield, you actually get to pick both options. Yeah, if you just have like Sokka and 5 allies on the battlefield, give them a couple of prowess triggers, cast a spell and you will just win the game on the spot. I can promise you that much. Clever Concealment. For 4 mana you get to phase out any number of non-land permanents you control. And this card also has the Convoke mechanic, meaning that we can tap our creatures to help pay for the mana cost. And since all the tokens that Sokka generates us are actually white ally tokens, we can use them to pay for the white mana pips in this card's cost. One of the best protection spells in any creature-based deck to protect your board from being wiped by mass removal spells. Irenicus Vile Duplication. If you already thought Sokka's effects are absolutely insane, how about controlling 2 Sokkas at the same time? This 4 mana sorcery speed spell will allow you to create a copy out of any creature you control, except it will get flying and it won't be legendary. So whenever you cast this on Sokka, you will now get a second copy of him. Whenever you then cast any non-creature spell, you will get to generate 2 white ally tokens, and all of your allies will actually get the prowess keyword twice. Just a simple 4 mana spell that will double all the value you are already able to generate in this deck. Purphoros, God of the Forge. For 4 mana, you get a legendary enchantment indestructible creature. Now usually in this type of deck we won't be able to hit the 5 devotion, and Purphoros will just be an enchantment, which honestly is perfectly fine, because passively whenever any creature enters the battlefield under our control, either Purphoros being an enchantment or a creature, he will deal 2 damage to each opponent. So every non-creature spell you cast, every ally you generate will now ping down the entire table, allowing you to just whittle down your opponent's life totals and make it really easy to take them out of the game. Now, like I already mentioned in the intro, Purphoros might be way better if you actually play a really token heavy generating playstyle. That being said, he will still generate you a huge amount of value in this deck, and since he is an indestructible enchantment, it is actually pretty hard to deal with him. Elspeth Stormslayer, a 5 mana planeswalker that will passively double up any token you generate, both doubling up on all the treasures you generate in this deck and all the allies you will be generating in this deck. Now that in itself is already some really crazy value, but Elspeth also has 3 amazing activated abilities. First ability allows you to generate a 1/1 soldier token, which will be 2 soldier tokens thanks to her passive effect. Not the most relevant of abilities, but I suppose you can use these 1/1 tokens as some chump blockers. Her 0 ability allows you to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and they will get flying until the end of turn, buffing up all the allies you already have in this deck and giving them evasion, making them nearly impossible to block. And her last ability allows you to destroy any creature on the board with mana value 3 or greater. An excellent way to just pinpoint remove any creature on the board you don't like. By far one of the most high impact planeswalkers ever printed. And the last card in this section is Kindred Discovery, a 5 mana enchantment that allows us to choose a creature type whenever it enters the battlefield. And whenever a creature of the chosen type either enters the battlefield or attacks, we get to draw a card. And the amount of cards this enchantment will draw you is absolutely insane. Every non-creature spell you cast and every ally you generate will draw you a card, and if you do decide to swing with like 6 of your ally tokens, you will draw 6 cards in the process. It's safe to say that I'm really sad that I couldn't fit this one into the budget. If you want to know what cards to swap out for these upgrades, I will flash it into the screen right now, so pause the video if you want to see it. And that's it for my take on Sokka Tenacious Tactician, a spellslinger commander that's both the token generator and the token buffer all combined in one card. And honestly, I had a huge amount of fun actually building and playtesting this deck. It's fast, it's explosive, and it never really plays the same way twice, which really makes this into one of those decks that stay really fun and interesting over the long term. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, make sure to drop a boomerang emoji in the comments below, so I know you're a part of the crew that actually watches these videos until the end. Share this video with your entire playgroup, hit the like button, hit subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon so you don't miss next week's video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in next week's video.